This videotape is edited from an advanced training in Boulder, Colorado, May 1988. Many of the participants had also attended 2 advanced trainings with Richard 6 and 9 months earlier. The first day of the training, Richard teaches and installs the major elements of a positive learning strategy in preparation for the next 3 days. The rest of the training is devoted to how people build and maintain generalizations using time and metaprogram distinctions. Since this training is a carefully sequenced one, you will gain most by viewing the tapes in order.
Okay, this morning what I want to do is to begin to expand on 2 things. One is that yesterday I noticed in the last exercise we did that we began to build in the grid that we were building in, that some of you began to hear things. That on your little list you did bring your pieces of paper back. If not, they're being burned indelibly in your mind. The pieces of paper, can I have one of those for a minute so I can do it in order? Thank you. Sorry, you can just leave that hand out there. It's funny, I forget sometimes when I teach hypnosis seminars that people don't know who Milton is. I'm so used now to everybody having seen videotapes of everything. When I just did this one in Houston, about half the people were all employees of a furniture store. They wanted to go to a sales training seminar, but I was doing hypnosis, so the guy, rather than arranging separate sales training, sent them all to a hypnosis course. Right. They're now all walking around saying, "So you want to buy a chair, do you? I'll sit in this chair that you're about to buy. And as you do so, you'll have a growing sense of satisfaction and allow your eyes to close, your hand to go involuntarily to your wallet." My favorite Milton videotapes they made are the first time they videoed Milton. And then those are the ones where it starts out and you see Milton like this. It's what you're looking at. You see Milton sitting there, and Milton turns around and he's got this person next to him, and he goes, "Now, in a moment, you're going to go into a trance, deeply, but not yet. First, I'm going to count from 1 to 20. Slowly, and with each count, you may have found that you're going 1/20th of the way into deep trance. Now, 1, the camera goes, 2, and it goes out of focus. 3, it goes down to the floor. 45 minutes of blurred floor. The end of which, right, the end of the work he does with the client that he's working with, "The moment I reach over, I'm going to touch you. And when I do, you will begin to count to yourself from 20 to 1. You'll wake up 1/20th of the way. Each count. Begin now." Right. And suddenly the camera goes. And suddenly it goes like this. It goes clear. So all you have is you have a 1-hour tape of blurred carpet. But it's great. I used to show it in my groups. And what always amazed me is people stood there and stared at it for an hour. But it was such a great induction because the cameraman was obviously so susceptible. They actually had to stick stuff in his ears because they had to retape. And, it's like, you can watch, but you can't listen. Which is always good because when Milton says he was working with 2 people when they refilmed it. And the camera's pointing at the one lady. There's a lady and a man there, and it was pointing at the lady. And Milton turns around at one point, and he goes, "Now, Nick, how do you feel about it?" And the camera goes for a close-up of the lady. And I loved it because when you show that film to groups, I used to show them to the seminars I did all the time. People do this, they go. It's one of those things where, it's one of those things where you go and you go, "Now, there are 3 reasons that I want you to pay attention to. Okay, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. It's a nice one because it overlaps in the middle. Makes a good trance induction. It's like this one. Did I ever show you this one? One of my favorite trance inductions. I learned this from the great Kreskin. I swear to you, he's a great hypnotist, especially when he doesn't know he's doing it. But he really is a master of watching nonverbal behavior. Because see, like he does things where, you know, he reads people's minds. One of the ways in which he does the kind of things that he does is like he did a little trick one night where he gave somebody a little bottle and a piece of paper, and he had him go write something on the piece of paper, stick it in the bottle, and then the guy had him put it in one of his pockets, not tell him which one. Now, what I love about this, I want you to think about this trick, okay? Because the guy's wearing a suit, right? And he gives him, it's not a big bottle, but just a small one. Put it in one of his pockets, and Kreskin had to guess which pocket. Now, if you have any sensory experience at all, right, you should be able to go and know. And this audience was absolutely flabbergasted that he could tell which pocket the bottle was in. And get this, now you would think it would be enough to just look and see which one has got the bulge. But no. Kreskin comes out, and when he gave him a piece of paper to put in the bottle that would barely fit in it. He told him that when he put it in, he'd have to tap it down. And so he asked the guy, and the guy came out and he said, "Did you tap it down real hard?" And the guy, when he remembered, the guy lifts up his hand and he goes, "Yeah." "Now, which pocket do you think he put it in?" Can't go like that very well, can you? Now, the amazing thing about this is that the Kreskin actually got it wrong on national TV, too. The trance induction goes like this. You take your hands and lock them together like this. It's Sunday morning. This will be a good one for this. Come on, you guys. Do what I tell you to, or I'll hurt you. Remember, it's morning, and I'm not good at that. And what you do is I'm not. You know what time it is in Honolulu right now? 6 o'clock in the morning. Think about it. Am I still up? No. But I should have been. See, it's my bedtime now. Put your hands like this, and then take the two fingers like this, and open them up, and then what you do is you lift it up and stare straight through the middle of them, and as you do so, your fingers will get sucked together by an irresistible force. And the closer they get, the more you'll enjoy it, and when they touch, just close your eyes. Take a deep breath and relax. That's a good one, isn't it? Say a small prayer and return back here in a few minutes with cash in hand. All large denomination bills are readily accepted. We take checks, credit cards, money orders. Now, the thing about the list here is that these are the grids that I want you to build in are detection devices. They're detection devices that allow you to know something about a person. Now, of course, being the maniacs that NLPers turn into, somebody in this group has done too much NLP. Of course, came up to me this morning and said, "If you find out somebody's a mismatcher, how do you change it?" You don't. Don't. Repeat, and repeat. Don't change this stuff yet. You got to really be good to be able to change it in a way that's helpful. Now, you may think you're being helpful, but since this is so pervasive, if you can't control exactly when changes at this level occur, you're going to hurt people. And, you know, as much as a lot of people there, what they think ecology is all about, they think ecology means be careful. That isn't what ecology is. Ecology and how you really build in ecology and ecological changes in people is by being able to control time so that the changes occur only when they're needed. Say, to give somebody confidence when in a situation, let's say somebody has great anxiety when they go on escalators. I mean, it's something that, you know, they do it, but they really don't like it. And they kind of look like a fool. You know, when they have to sit there and it takes them 10 minutes to work up the courage, you know, and I mean, it's just an inconvenience. Now, if you take that person and give them overwhelming confidence so they can go up the escalators, but it dribbles over into everything else, that is not necessarily good because there's a lot of things where having confidence will fuck up your ability to learn. See, if you're overconfident, what happens is you lose competency. See, for example, how many of you have done the firewalk in here? Right. Okay, I want you to verify this for me. Isn't it now, the thing is it's not enough to do the firewalk. Now prestige is based on how many times you've done it. It's like people would go, well, I've done the fire walk 9 times. You know, this is like, what's the matter? Didn't you get it right? Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's like nowadays, you know, some people that have really gotten it down, they go home at night, build a fire, pull the chair up, and stick their feet in it. You know, this is what I call when your brain slips a disc, right? Goes, you know, it's like a record skipping. It's like the point of the whole thing gets lost. Now, the thing is that when you're making decisions themselves, decisions are real fertile ground for us to be able to make changes. See, it's not that you change how somebody is chunking. It's not that you change whether they're doing things by comparison, whether they're in time or through time. What you do is you use it. This is where you see. It's not that when you found out that somebody was primarily visual, you didn't go make them be kinesthetic, did you? Some of you did, didn't you? I saw that. I love the person in the group that went. Guys, it's like people, especially the people in the therapy game, because you know, they went for years working with clients, not really being able to change them, and then they got some tools where they actually could make changes. Then they want to change everything, even their name. Now, the thing that I want you to pay attention to when we're going through this is it's not that you change the way that somebody is making decisions. It's that, again, the overall pattern was to be able to do elicitation by realizing that you hold your own behavior constant. Now, by holding your behavior constant, that doesn't mean you do the same thing over and over again. It means that you cycled. Now, if we go back to the exercise where I had you ask 2 questions in time, 2 questions between time. And it's not so much that you know which ones are which. It's that by asking 2 of the same kinds of questions, you have them engage in an activity, which is, and it doesn't matter whether it's in time, between time, or through time, and then you find a question you can alternate to where they do the other. This is to make it easy for you to detect. Just like when you were learning to do the predicate stuff, you asked a couple of visual questions, a couple of auditory questions, a couple of kinesthetic questions. Now, with some people, if you remember, you used to ask them a couple of visual questions, I used to give you a couple of auditory answers. Ask them a couple of auditory questions, I give you a couple of visual answers. Now, it doesn't matter that that person was different. What matters is that you notice it. See, I was telling somebody a little earlier about a client I had who was the ultimate in a mismatcher. His presenting problem is that he was arguing with people constantly. The way he put it is everybody in the world bickers with me. Okay, now, of course we know he has nothing to do with it, right? Okay, first thing is if you want to stay stuck, the first thing is disassociate from any control over things. See, the belief that we were installing yesterday afternoon, you know what the best part of it is? Is if you make yourself responsible for everything that happens, even if you're not, you stand a chance of being able to influence it. If it's my fault, I can do something about it. If it's your fault, then you have to. You know, so I'm always willing to take the blame for stuff like that. I mean, when there's a difficulty, if you immediately assign the responsibility, see, when clinicians blame the clients, you know, because the clients weren't up to changing. My favorite one is he's not ready yet. You know, what do you have to do? Knead him for a while? You know, put a little yeast in, put them over the oven and let them rise for a while. Now, if the person isn't ready yet, then you should have tools to make them ready. Either that or tell them to come back in a couple of months, you know, rather than continuing to work with them all the time. The other one was what they used to do, the thing where they used to have clients weren't mature enough, whatever the hell that meant. You know, that's one of those normalizations that I never even wanted to take a look at. You know, there's some things like you know, beliefs and trust and things that were worth denominalizing. But maturity, that one never appealed to me at all. Now, this morning what we're going to do is we're going to start to examine decisions. But again, decision is a normalization. And the real fertile ground, by the way, for learning new things in NLP, because people keep saying, where do you come up with all this stuff? Well, it's real simple. What I do is I pick normalizations. I open up the dictionary and I just kind of peruse through it, right? And I look down and I look for normalizations until I find one where they don't have a verb form. you know. And some of the ones, even the ones that have a verb form, the description you'll find in the dictionary tells you that what it means is another word. When you go to that word, it tells you that it means this one. They're what's called a tautology. You know, real helpful, you know. It's like, you know, what is understanding? It's when you believe something. And you look up, what is believing? It's when you understand something. And they go back and forth. Now, when you get into to the situation where definitions become tautologies, and especially the situation, you know, like nominalizations like trust, you know, even though that, you know, one can be trusting, one is trusting, but the denominalization of the actual verb process itself about how you trust, you know, what is trust made of, how do you do it if you wanted to do it deliberately? That whenever you look at it in terms where the referential index is something where you decide that you're going to do it deliberately and on command, the nominalizations which don't have that there are really where you get to find all kinds of interesting things, because it's where people say, I have a belief. The old thing in the meta model, by the way, was give it to me. It wasn't about what. And that is, if you read in the Structure of Magic, it literally says that when you test for nominalizations, the way to test for them is, you know, is to act like they're a thing. And it turns out with clients, that's really a much more efficient way of doing things. One of the things I want this morning when we go through the elicitation about decisions is to stay again at the meta level. Okay. Remain that what you're doing is I want you to be able to get to the point where when you're discussing something, because this is really where elicitation is going to get subtler and subtler to the point where you hear it in normal conversation. We're moving away from formal elicitation and moving to the point where you start hearing this all the time in conversation. So when somebody comes in the first 3 or 4 minutes they're talking, you make a shift in your own mind where you don't worry about content, because it's content free. Now this means you're going to give up asking questions like who, what, and where. Okay, you remain with when and how questions, but mostly just to keep the person going, because what we're going to do is something that's called tracking. Now, tracking is a process that's described in Patterns 2 in the section on transderivational search. And if you take a meaning in a conversation, okay, the meaning of a paragraph, one of the things that happens is you can say things like, well, Jane went to the store. She bought some milk. Now, she tags back to Jane in the conversation and pulls meaning forward inside of paragraphs. Now, as you listen to people when they construct sentences, which I realize is against most of your NLP training to let people utter 2 sentences simultaneously, but if you actually begin to think in a larger chunk size where you begin to listen to things in terms of paragraphs. Now, the concept of a paragraph, not the thing that was taught so much in school, but what we're thinking about a paragraph is being a cycle of meaning. Because people go through whole cycles. Now, when discussing, what we're going to use as the content for this is going to be decision strategies. Now, as you may well can figure out just from looking at it on the surface, decision strategies are unique in the sense that if you only had one decision strategy, you know it's going to crap out when you have 3 different kinds of time. Because there's 3 different kinds of activities. Some activities are in-time activities. For example, sex, right? I mean, people who do between-time sex aren't there while they're having it. You know, I mean, they're the ones that are comparing this with some other event. Is this as good as another time or as good as another person? See, I mean, the people that are in time, you know, are totally there. It's like, what was that thing I read? I read it in one of these sex books about, I love this. This is how to maintain, it's a section on how to maintain your erection was to see yourself from across the room. And I thought, why even be there? Might as well go in the next room. You know, you could just hold it out like this. You wouldn't even need another person then either. You know, obviously the authors of said book weren't really using their head, so to speak. What were you guys doing last night? We know which side of the ambiguity you went for. Now, the thing is that decisions, when you're deciding about activities, some activities themselves are by their nature going to be more practically, where decision strategies are going to work better for in time, some for between time, and some for through time activities. Now, the trick to what I want you to do is, again, you're going to cycle with the person, but this time what you're going to do is you're going to oscillate between coming up with 3 different kinds of things. For example, what would be an activity where between time makes more sense? Decisions. Because you're going to ask people about decisions that everybody makes, what we might refer to as everyday or frequent types of decisions. What would be a good between time activity? Buying a car, maybe? Yeah. It's not something you're doing constantly. Once you buy it, you've got it. Now, there's some people that actually continue to do it. They do it through time. They continually keep deciding whether or not they made the right decision, even after they bought the car. These are people who are quite susceptible to something called buyer's remorse. And their buyer's remorse is that, like, once they buy something, they still continue to make the decision. And they keep deciding constantly, did I do the right thing? And when the car runs well, they feel good. And when the car runs bad, they're still deciding that they made the wrong decision. This is deciding about your deciding. This is where people go into infinite regress. Okay, how about in time? What are some in time activities? What? A savings? I said activities. Sailing? Yeah, I don't know. I've never sailed, so I'll have to take your word for it. I like things with motors on them. I don't trust the wind. What? Driving? Okay, well, it's kind of nice if driving is an in-time activity. But, of course, if you don't go between times, you may have some problems, too. There are some driving is made up of separate activities. For example, have you ever driven in a foreign country where they make new signs? You know, I just moved to San Diego, and one day I drove down across the border. And I haven't been in Mexico in years and years. And I drove up, and here's a sign that said alto. And the first thing that came to my mind was soprano. Alto, sax, you know. It just slipped my mind, and I drove right through it. You know, I forgot that it meant stop. And fortunately, it was dark, and they don't have lights in Mexico. And I didn't have my lights on, so nobody saw me. I just found out if you're going to break one law, you might as well break a bunch of them at once. It works better. Okay, how about what are some through time activities?
That's the one I was saying, like savings over time to work at the end. Like life insurance.
Life insurance isn't an activity. It is a decision you make. Is the process of buying life insurance a through time activity?
Depositing the money each month.
That sounds like a between time phenomenon to me, doesn't it? You do it now and then. See, through time things are things like your attitude. You know, it varies, it fluctuates analogically, but it's going on. See, you're always having beliefs and making decisions. You maintain them. And it's not that, see, through time doesn't mean that it doesn't change. It makes it so that it's much more of an analog type phenomenon. See, it's one thing to have your timeline like this, you know, so you're in time. Everything is new. You can go see the same movie over and over again. See, through time people, they're moving through time. In other words, the techniques that I taught you about getting on your timeline and zooming through them, this is what through time people are doing constantly. Yes, it is true. We know what they're like. They're always jumping down their timeline and going, "Rrrr." Life is a roller coaster for them. People who spend most of their time doing through time things, especially when you take activities that really are inappropriately dealt with through time, make them through time's activity, it becomes real psychedelic, you know. When you do that, man, it's life in the 60s. Now, the thing is that the kinds of questions, what are some more? All right, let's do it this way. Give me some in-time activities. Okay. What? Anything you enjoy? I enjoy playing piano, and it is not an in-time activity. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to play. I mean, you know, I wouldn't know if I was playing it well, or part of what I enjoy is getting better at it. See, there are some things, like even the activity of learning certain things, you have to oscillate. Some, you know, good musicians, you know, that sometimes when they're in the performance, they may be in time, but when they're in the process of learning, they do it between time. And when they're in the process of deciding how they're going to practice and what they're going to do, they do it through time, where they go back and analyze the way they've been going about it to find out how they get stuck at plateaus to come up with a new direction. Through time activities are real good for establishing direction. That's one of the things that they're extremely good at. Now you have to keep in mind that with the person you're going to sit down, they are different than you. So one of the things is that when you pick activities, the person may not do it the way you think. But it doesn't matter as long as you hold them constant. Now, if you think of things where you just totally want to be lost in them, you don't want to know anything about the past and nothing about the future. You want to be completely in the moment. And this is the best way to do the activity. Okay, there are some activities where you want to go through and review and come all the way back up, go through time. So that time itself, you know, it's almost as if, see, through time people are ones that take their timeline and they go like this. Pull it on, go back, forth, back, forth. They're analyzing through the years. One of the things that through time activities are good for is noticing difference, how much better you've gotten at something, setting a direction for going places. Lots and lots of athletes that are highly skilled do a lot of through time activity because they're able to calibrate how they have a sense of getting better and they keep doing it. They're also, that's why they have slumps, because when they make one mistake, it tells them they're going down. Do you ever think, I was talking to Barbara yesterday, and we were talking about how much programming goes on with athletes, that when they're on the road, it's going to be worse. Do you ever think about it? And he goes, well, you know, there's the home field advantage. I mean, they literally program athletes, well, you're going on the road, you're not going to do as well. And it's amazing how much it works out. The media does it, and the coaches do it as well. With one of the teams that I actually worked with, a professional team, I was talking to an assistant coach, and he was literally telling me that, you know, he said that he had to go and give them they were going on the road, and he said, well, you know, we have a little speech that we always tell them so that when he said it this way, he goes, when things go badly on the road, they don't get too discouraged. And as he started to walk, I grabbed a hold of him, and I said, wait a minute. I said, you do this every time? And he goes, well, yeah. He said, you know, we're afraid. I like this. We're afraid that if we don't, then, you know, if they have a few bad games, you know, it'll carry back to when we have the home field advantage, right? And I said to him, has it ever occurred to you that as a hypnotic process, this isn't really a good idea? And the guy said, well, do you really think that just with, you know, in conversation, and he said that it's really going to program them to do something like this? So I decided to demonstrate to him. So I casually, during the course of the evening, we were sitting in a comedy club. I programmed the cocktail waitress that when the show closed to begin dropping glasses and to break them all over the place. A friend of mine owns the club. He really liked this. And so when the show ended, we were sitting in there talking, and this lady began breaking glasses all over the place. And she was going, God, I don't know why I'm suddenly so clumsy, you know. And I mean, I really laid it on thick, all levels, you know, simultaneously, each time she came up. And I pointed out to him that, you know, yeah, of course, when you say things like, if I say, well, you know, I said, you know, you can try and enjoy, you know, doing housework as much as you want. It's an invited inference. Now, I want you guys to try to do as well as you do at home, in the home games. But if something goes wrong, I don't want you to become discouraged, right? Now, this kind of programming is not where it's at. The kind of programming is, what we actually shifted was to get the team to understand, going on the road, that it was a rare